On punishment. So one of the first things the book talks about is modeling. So kids are going to model what they see. So if you are out of control and yelling and spanking them and acting all crazy when you're doing that during punishment, that has the potential to be how they are going to act when they grow up. So that's definitely something you want to think about. When you think about, when you're not at your best, that's something that your kid's going to see. And so you want to try to pull it together so that you can provide a good model for their behavior. Physical punishment. We've talked a little bit about this in some of the other chapters. It is outlawed in 41 countries. That being said, the U.S. has a favorable attitude towards it being used, and they do remember it being used by their parents. So in this chart, let's see, the green, remember it being used. South Korea is about 85 or so, and then the United States about 81, 82. And then the favorable attitude, South Korea is at about 60, and then the U.S. is actually the highest, 61, 62, somewhere in there. We've talked about it before. Some negative things from spanking. It could lead to the child basically learns to fear the parent because the parent's, doling out punishment, especially if you're acting crazy when you're doing it. It could lead to aggression later on. But some of the research suggests that that's only for severe and frequent spanking. So if it's something, some of the research says that if it's not severe and it's under control when you're doing it and it's not very frequent, it doesn't have that many long-lasting effects. Some people completely disagree with this, as we've talked about in the discussions. You might, if you want to talk a little bit more about that in the discussions, the idea of spanking is not if it's positive. There's definitely some potential negatives to it. I don't see any research that says, hey, here's all the great things that happen from spanking. So that's another way to kind of think about it. Okay. Kind of related to this is the idea of maltreatment. Developmentalists, they use this word maltreatment in place of what the public says for child abuse. Basically, there's a bigger range for the different types of behavior that fits into this. The types of children maltreatment, some of these are really obvious, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, obviously. Child neglect, like if you don't give them food, if they have dirty clothes. On this abuse, maltreatment, there's no single factor that causes it. There's just all kinds of, again, developmental stuff is correlational nature. So there's all kinds of factors that go into creating who's going to not treat their kids right. What I find really interesting is this here. About a third of the parents who were abused themselves, they go on to abuse their own kids. And depending on how you look at it, that's kind of good. I used to think this number would be much higher than 1/3, again, because of modeling. So that's what you see, that's what you grow up, and that's what you do. Like if you were abused, that you would go on to be an abuser yourself. But the research is not necessarily meeting that out, the idea that it's only about a third that go on. You might discuss that in discussions, why you think that is. I have my own ideas. Maybe we'll get into that next week. So, related to this, the developmental consequences of abuse, maltreatment, poor emotional regulation. Again, the thing that you're definitely trying to foster in your kids. Abuse is something that's going to work against that. Again, that's where it's at. You want to promote the regulation, the executive function as much as possible, and do things to help foster it. If they can't control their emotions, their behaviors, living in this society is going to be really hard for them. It can lead to attachment problems later on, which we'll talk about in an adult chapter, and it can lead to problems in peer relationships. Other things like psychological problems, depression, delinquency, school issues, violent romantic relationships, risk-taking, substance abuse, all kinds of negative things. So you definitely want to avoid this for sure. Basically, maltreatment, abuse, this is another one of those things that can stick with you throughout the entire lifespan. Being abused basically can leave a stain on some people that it does not come off very easily. Okay, that's it on maltreatment. On the next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about sibling relationships.